So let's say we want to make a function that tells us whether a number is odd or not. So we're going to have a function called isOdd. So I'm going to name my function isOdd, and I'm going to pass it a parameter, and the parameter I'm going to pass it is n. So generally, functions need to use their parameters, not global variables. So if I pass this function in n, what this function needs to do is figure out if n is odd or not, and return true if it is odd, and return false if it's not. So I'll do a little if here. So if n, when divided by 2, if the remainder is equal to 1, then we know the number is odd. And so I will return the Boolean value true. And if that is not true, then I will return the Boolean value false. Okay, so that's the code for the function, and now I want to test it. So really quickly, I will call the function isOdd, and I'll pass it 15. And then I'll call isOdd, and I'll pass it 20202. And just see what I get in that case. So then I'll run here. So this defines a function. It doesn't do anything. Then the function here runs, and I got to print this. I got to print what it returns. Otherwise, I won't be able to see it. It ran, it just didn't print. Okay, there we go. So it'll print the results of those. And so you can see over here on the right-hand side, it prints true because isOdd returned true. And then here it returned false. Now, I'd like you to be a little more verbose in your checking here. So let's just try this. Let's just say, let's do a quick check. Let's say pick a number and it's 15. And then let's print is, insert the num, odd with a question mark, and then we will call our function isOdd, and we will pass it num, and it will return either true or false, which will get appended to the print statement here. So this is going to show over here. It should say, is 15 odd? True. And if I do a different number, 20202 for example, and I run it on the right hand side here, is 202 odd? It returns false. So this is the code that shows my function being called and checking to show that it works. Now what I want you to do to finish up here is add some comments. So we want to state what exactly this function does. So isOdd determines if a integer is odd or not. The parameter that it takes is an integer, so we say that, and then we tell what the function returns, which is a Boolean. Sometimes functions return integers, sometimes functions return floats, sometimes functions return lists, but we want to tell what it does. So the first just explains what the function does. The second line explains what integers we pass to it, what parameters we pass to it. And the third line here tells us what the function returns. And then this down here is the code that tests the function. Now all of this was, in my theoretical example, part 1. So I'll add a comment, and I'll just put a bunch of these on here to kind of delimit it, so when you look at the code, you can quickly see where part 1 is. And once you've tested that and you know it's working, then you're going to move on to part 2. So when I look at your code, I should see part 1, part 2. It should be easy for me to find these parts, okay? Now, when you start working on part 2, you don't want to keep running this code here. So what you can do is you can highlight the entire part 1, hold down the command key and hit the /, and it will comment it out completely. Things that were already comments now get double commented. So now you can work on part 2, whatever the next function is, and start working on it and testing it, etc. And then when you run it, it'll just run your function that you're testing. It won't run all this. And then, of course, when you're completely finished, you'll go back, highlight all the code that you commented out, hold down command /, and that will uncomment it and bring it back. So that way you can work on each individual part of the code as needed. Okay? All right, good luck.